Hello, it's Elizabeth from Elizabeth's Oracle. Thank you so much for tuning in today. We are going to be talking about the sun's journey through the fixed water sign of Scorpio. Here are the start times for each section of the video so that you can get to what you want to watch. I will not be in front of the camera today. However, I did shoot some B-roll of the ocean so we can get all watery in that. So thank you again for joining me, and let's look at some charts. All right, so let's take a look at some charts. As usual, the first one that I pull up is for the day that the sun changes signs. On this chart, in the lower left-hand corner is where all the action is in Scorpio. We, of course, see the sun entering. Then we have Venus in her retrograde motion, moving backwards in Scorpio, and of course Mercury and Jupiter all the way up to 26 degrees. That is a lot of Jupiter strengthening all the Scorpio themes. We'll talk about that in the interpretation section. I just want you to get your bearings here. So all of your water signs will be in blue. Moving to the right, our earth signs will be in the green. Our air signs, where we have Mars in the south node there in Aquarius, for example, will be in the purple. And our fire signs in this chart moving up, Aries moon, fire sign in the yellow. So that will be consistent throughout the video so that you can follow along. One thing I didn't pull up new moon and full moon charts for this month because it is such a busy cycle. There's a lot of other things to talk about, but if you look at that moon there in Aries, you guys who know astrology know that it goes into Taurus next. And when we have a Taurus moon opposite a Scorpio sun, that is a full moon, and we will be having that on the 24th. Luckily, low degrees of both. We have 1 degree and 13 minutes there, so not too shocking, not too intense, but that's a whole lot of Scorpio that will be interacting with that full moon. So I don't want to say that it's completely light. Let's move to the next chart for the 31st of October. A lot of planets will be moving around, and I'll show you the cards for that in part 2. But you're going to see a lot of changing, and you're going to see a lot of things happening in pairs, like on the same day. So amongst the changes that we're seeing, we are getting Venus going back into Libra during her retrograde, out of some of that intense Scorpio energy. And then Mercury moves ahead into Sagittarius, again, lessening some of that Scorpio energy. So in this chart, you just see at the top the sun and Jupiter left in Scorpio, but we don't really want to minimize that because it is Jupiter at the very late degrees. On our next chart, this is one of our days that's planetary shifts. So the nodes of the moon are shifting finally from the Leo Aquarius axis to the Cancer Capricorn one. So the North Node will now be for the next 18 months in Cancer. But the big thing on this day is Uranus moving back into Aries. That's a lot of Aries. And the interesting thing about this, for you guys who are kind of, good at this, you'll see we do get our T-cross in the cardinal signs with the nodes of the moon, because they move back to 29 degrees and 59 minutes. And of course, so does Uranus. This is also election day in the U.S., so this signals some big things. And again, on our lunar watch, the moon will be new the following day, the 7th of November, at 15 degrees of Scorpio at 11 minutes. So we're getting ready for a new moon here, but this is a big day. Mark it in your calendar. Uranus coming back to finish its Aries transit. Big deal. And then kind of creating a lot of tension in that cross. And if you notice at the very top, Venus is at 27 degrees of the 4th cardinal sign, Libra. And we kind of notice there's one thing when it's an exact square or T-square. This one is 2 degrees difference. But when the planets are in a 3-degree range, we know that they're all going to be part of this. So this is a pretty intense cross. So yeah, just kind of heads up. So let's get on to the next chart because it's such a busy cycle. And this is, of course, the big deal. This is the big change during this cycle. This is Jupiter going into Sagittarius. It will be there until December of next year. Finally, again, taking the pressure off of all that intense Scorpio. So when we get to this chart and you look over in that left-hand corner again, you'll see Jupiter just having gotten into Sagittarius. We do have the moon in Scorpio because we are still in that new moon energy, but that's it. Remember how we started this cycle with 4 planets in Scorpio? So by the time we get to November 8th, a lot of that has gone, but it'll probably get pretty intense before things shift there. And the next one I want to point out to you, because again, I just pulled up 5 charts for this. We have so much going on. Look at Mars over there to the right in the lower in the purple. Mars is finishing up its transit of Aquarius. Now, this is huge because Mars has been in Aquarius it'll be the last 6 months with just a little respite back in Capricorn when it was retrograde. But it went into Aquarius back in May, right as Uranus moved into Taurus. So Mars finally finishing up all these Aquarian things, and it's going into Pisces. Not its favorite place, but it is also part of the changing. And that is going to happen on the 15th of November. But I just wanted to point it out in this chart so that you can notice it. And then the last chart for this section, a lot of charts, a lot of action, and I'll show you that in part 2, is the 16th of November. Finishing up this cycle, we have both Venus finally turning direct, stationing, but we have Mercury going retrograde. So I'll give you the dates for its retrograde in part 2, but I want to point out Mercury retrograde alert. And in fact, it goes into the zone just a few days before Halloween, I believe on the 27th of October. So you guys who are big Mercury retrograde watchers, get everything done before October 27th. So those are the charts. And now let me do a little bit of a deep dive on what planets are moving, what's going on, and a little bit of interpretation, but mostly just it's a little hard to pick up from just the chart. So I want to show you, point out things a little bit more in part 2. Okay? Okay, well, the big point this cycle is I see this as, if not a sea change, a lot of shifting. We come into it again with that Scorpio stellium, including Jupiter in its most intense degrees of Scorpio. I told you guys a year ago when Jupiter was heading into Scorpio, I said, look for issues, sexual scandals, trauma, and of course, on a collective level, we're processing a lot about that. There's so much we didn't know a year ago when Jupiter went into Scorpio, and maybe we wish we didn't know, but if we're going to heal these things, we do need to be, that's the first thing, Scorpio, it's about the truth and getting to the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So we've done a dive into some pretty difficult stuff. Scorpio rules the sexual organs. I will be doing a special on Jupiter in Sagittarius, which thankfully is where it is going next. I'll do that when the sun goes into Sagittarius because it just kind of matches up. And plus there's a lot to cover in this cycle. That's the big one, Jupiter shifting, but look for it to get pretty intense before it shifts because everything changes on that November 6th to November 8th, new Scorpio moon on the 7th. Part of that energy is the Venus retrograde in Scorpio, which I covered in detail in the Sun into Libra 2018 edition of the newsletter. So definitely look at that if you want to understand this Venus retrograde. But luckily, on the 31st of October, it goes back into Libra, again, kind of lightening some of the energy, however, adding to the cardinal energy. But that intense Scorpio thing is cooled off a little with Venus going back into its home sign of Libra, balancing out relationships. The other planets changing signs on the 31st, Mercury going ahead on into Sagittarius, our first little bit of Sag optimism coming into the skies, also lightening things up and hopefully bringing in a little bit of enthusiasm. And, Sag always kind of points the way out of that heavy Scorpio energy. So it's a nice blessing. And of course, we'll talk a lot about Sag next month. Other planetary changes on the 6th. That is the big one where Uranus comes back to complete 4 months of very, very intense degrees of Aries. I feel like things that were brought up in the 2012 to 2015 7 Pluto-Uranus squares, some of those issues are going to come up for cardinal people. Anything that wasn't cleaned up then, probably likely to come in. But that's an intense amount of energy for Uranus. Uranus is really powerful. For those of you who aren't familiar, chaos. It is the game changer. It's also innovation and breakthroughs. And Aries is really impulsive. It's also a leader. So maybe there's something on a technological front that we get to. So it will be retrograde until the beginning of the year. It goes direct and then it moves ahead in Aries, but it only gets back to 28 degrees. This is a lot of Aries, 29, 28 degrees for the next 4 months of Uranus. And then finally on March, it crosses over and we get the rest of the 7-year transit through 2026 of Uranus in fixed, stable, grounded, earthy Taurus. But intense period here while it is back in Aries. And again, like I said, when those nodes change on that same day, everything's at 29 degrees and 59 minutes. So that's pretty strong. Those nodes, again, creating a lot of energy. The aspect with the North Node, that's what are we learning? What could we do better? This is about caretaking, care for children. This is also the home, but it's also where we're emotional, nostalgic. So, it's going to be interesting to see how this manifests, but it will play into all this watery energy, both as we have the planets transit Scorpio, but it will be working with Neptune in Pisces. So a lot of energy in the watery side of things. And of course, when Mars goes in there, the 8th we covered, that's Jupiter changing signs. Really big deal. Again, we'll talk about it in next month's video because it lasts for over a year, so we have plenty of time to talk about it. But yeah, Jupiter is finishing up its 12th house stuff in Scorpio. Not fun. But on the 8th, finally, some change. Then Mars in Pisces. Not the easiest place for Mars. Mars, as you guys know, rules Aries. It is our energy. It's really powerful. It's passionate. It wants to get things going. In Pisces, it's a little lost. Pisces is Neptune ruled. It's mutable. It just wants to be at peace with everything. It wants to integrate things. And Mars, kind of has that war or warrior aspect. But as I explained in last month's video, I do think this is part of pricking some of those issues and cleaning them up. I think this is part of the Venus retrograde in Scorpio that matches up with Mars in Pisces. They are all trying to trigger our emotional stuff so that we can clean it out. That's also happening. And then on the 16th, the changes with Venus coming out of its retrograde, but Mercury starting its retrograde. And for those of you who like watching your Mercury retrogrades, here are the dates. So it will be direct on December 6th, and it doesn't leave the zone altogether until December 24th. So the sun is going into Scorpio for a month, and Scorpio is our 8th house stuff. It does have to do with intimacy, emotional intimacy, passion. In the ancient world, Mars ruled Scorpio, which I think anybody who's understands Scorpio energy gets it because it is very passionate. But again, the rough side is traumas. And because it's the sexual organs, issues, we see it all in the paper, assault and all of those things. So it's really important in this time period that we work on healing those issues. One of its symbols is the phoenix. So we come out of the fire. It's about purification, healing, being cleared and cleaned of all of those things. Interesting for this last year, with Jupiter in there, we have certainly seen all of that. And I think that during this cycle, while a lot of the planets will move out of Scorpio as the sun works its way through, after Jupiter changes signs, it's just the sun, but then the sun will be picking up those strong degrees of Scorpio. It's just kind of this last kind of shaking everything from the root, having this stuff come out so that we deal with it. If you've been undertaking anything to heal old emotional stuff, old wounds, doesn't have to be sexual trauma. It could just be other things that are still very upsetting for you. This is a very important time, particularly with the Venus retrograde and shadow period, to clear that out. But I would say things will come up. That period there, the 6th to 8th, to get pretty intense as Jupiter hits those strongest degrees. But that Scorpio, it really is here for healing. It's for transformation, and is to let go of what we don't need, clear it out. You can think of maybe a caterpillar is a little easier of an example. Can't be a butterfly until it goes through the caterpillar stage. This is a really good time to really transform things in your life. So do a little soul searching, particularly around that new moon on the 7th, of what do you not need anymore, what you're willing to let go of. And it's just it's one of the strongest times of the year for doing that kind of a prayer or ritual or work in letting go, grieving death, all of those kinds of issues, so that you can move forward. Let me move to the resources section because we have a good announcement there. All right, I'm Elizabeth from Elizabeth's Oracle. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I hope that you got a lot out of this. I was visiting with my friend Christina Walsh, who is a Scorpio, on her new radio show, Surfing the Psychic Waves. I'll put a link in the description box below. We talked about some of the things I covered here today, but we also gave an overview of where everything's going between now and the end of the year. So if you want some more information, check that out. It's free at Inflow Radio. If you want a personal reading, come to elizabethsoracle.co or .com. Get in touch with me and we can schedule a session for you. On Fridays, I do Free Minute Friday. You get 5 free minutes with any order you place on a Friday, and we can look at all these things and map out what's coming up for you based on your chart or just an intuitive reading. So whatever works for you. Other than that, I'm looking forward to being back here when the sun goes into Sagittarius. Oh, thank God for the fire signs. Well, we will see you then. Wishing you lots of blessings through all the intense Scorpio energy, ultimately peace and well-being.